Hello, is my audio working? Hopefully. See, wait for the stream to catch up, and hopefully it'll pop up. Hopefully. That should be any moment now. Okay, cool. At least live. Is audio working? Is audio working? If I swap that, does that make it work still? Loud and clear. Make sure it's on the settings I was on. Alright, so we're going to wait just a few minutes for people to get in. As I just posted a lot of the updates for people. Good to hear that people are able to hear me. Sorry, it's been a while. My hard drive crashed, so my computer has been out of commission for a good bit. And then I was gonna do this last week and got a cold, so just been a little slow trying to get back up into it. Anyway, yeah, let me actually just shift this way so I'm a little more centered. There we go. Yeah, so all kinds of really cool things with paleontology that have been happening. I'm only going to be doing from basically when I ended the last stream, which was partway through May, up until the up through July, and then we're going to do August separately, hopefully next weekend or the weekend after. Yeah, the hard drive crashing really set me back. So unfortunate, but what it is. Come on, let me get this to work. There we go. So yeah, that set me back. Like I said, gonna wait a little bit and try and get some other people to fill in here. As I drink my tea. Yeah, all kinds of cool paleo things that have been going on. Milo's in here, okay. Cool. Good to see people dropping in. A lot of the usual suspects, but definitely appreciate it regardless. Because, you know, the people who are normally here, like Milo, like to comment on things, and so it's good to have that kind of feedback. Okay, it is 10 o'clock. Another 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll get hopped into the first paper here that I have. Which I'm also realizing I think I may have forgotten to do one during the previous stream. The honestly kind of an important one in the exoparia one, which is the one Henry Sharp did with the extra jaw muscle on the theropod, well, dinosaurs in general. So at the end, I will try and remember that and chat about that some. Sean Crommet also in. Yeah, the cheek paper. Cheek, loosely, yeah. So how's everyone else doing? Doing well, excited about paleontology, presumably. Let's see. And the little delay on this stream. Is the picture slightly out of focus? It might be. I need to mess with this camera. But I'm going to be more or less in the corner for most of this, so it'll be something to adjust. Like I said, we just got the hard drive back, so I haven't had time to mess with all of my settings just yet. So that would definitely be the reason, if it is a little out of focus, why it seems a little out of focus. So apologies for that. Alright, I'm going to just get started then. So I'll jump to this one. Here we go. I'm actually going to pump in a little bit. There we go. Hello, dinosaur database. Alright, so this first one is segmentation of the early Xiphosaura and the evolution of the Thoracitron. Xiphosaura is just horseshoe crabs, and the Thoracitron is this kind of thing where when you think of most arthropods, they have all these segments. They kind of fuse those into one big segment. So that's kind of what happens with horseshoe crabs. And the question is, well, do they do this more than once? And are there parts of it that were done more than once? And the answer is a little bit varied. So here you can see this is one of the Thoracitrons. So you have your front axis, front edge of it. You have your axis down the middle, side parts, your various spines and stuff that can move. And then on the bottom, you have your bottom section basically. But they're mostly looking at the top because that's where we get the best fossils of them from. So the fossils sometimes still show where those different segments were before they fused, because this fusion happens as the animal grows. It's an ontogenetic thing. So the juveniles will still have all of those separate segments able to move freely. Looking at the fossils, when I get there we go. These are free tergites. Gosh, they're free tergites. That's essentially what segments are called. So those ones are able to free, but then you have some of this starting to fuse into things on some of these earlier horseshoe crabs. However, as you go down, here you go, you start getting it fused. However, really importantly, you still see where those sides, where those extra tergites were expressed, even though they are fused. You can still kind of tell where one starts and where one ends. So what they found is basically that, yes, there was one occurrence where they started to fuse. However, the loss of these kinds of boundaries happened multiple times in multiple groups, which suggests that they were doing similar things, and it was similar pressures that led them to evolve the same traits. Whereas some of them maintained these kinds of gaps, and even actually, after losing these lines, would re-evolve them. Not any of the modern ones as far as I know, but essentially, hey look, they converged back onto what they were ancestrally, which is kind of funny. So yeah, the fossil horseshoe crabs are not just modern horseshoe crabs. They did some funny things. So okay, next one. And this is mostly about Shuovia, which is this alvarezsaur from Mongolia. Let me just do a quick, which honestly, there's some good images of it. If you think of I'm actually gonna go to there we go, Mononicus prehistoric planet. This is going to be the closest thing to it, right? Prehistoric planet. People know prehistoric planet pretty well. This is the kind of alvarezsaur that I'm talking about in this paper. Not necessarily this one exactly, but a related animal. And so this paper a few years ago went, hey, look, we looked at the ear canals of these things, and it looks like it may have been able to hear about as well as a barn owl, which barn owls, even among owls, have very, very developed hearing. They're very cool that way. This paper went, okay, well, let's look at all of the traits of the ear canal, not just a few of them. And basically it's going, hey, it does plot more within most other dinosaurs as opposed to Tyto, the genus that is the barn owl. Excuse me. And basically what that's saying is it's really not that close in hearing to a barn owl. There are some of these things where, yeah, maybe it did hear better than some of these other dinosaurs, especially like, some of these outliers, but not barn owl status. And yeah, like you can see, it's kind of throwing off some of these linear regressions and all that kind of stuff. So it is interesting, but basically it's really, really hard to say things about the hearing of different animals when they've been dead for 70 million years. And you can see kind of where they're measuring the different traits in the entire cross-section of the ear canals here. So that's that one. Hey, science is hard. Sometimes people have limited data and don't find things. Doesn't seem consistent with the regressions. Yeah, like I said, it's I believe this is weighting Shuvia. That's part of it. But regardless, it's still just showing like, hey, it's just showing that these animals were not hearing as well as a barn owl. Hello, Nita, Anthony Higgins. Yeah, getting all kinds of people in now. Thank you. Oh, come on, clear. There we go. Do I need to sign in on this one? No, cool. Scroll down. There. This is calcium, strontium acid, isotope and trace element analysis of late Cretaceous dinosaur teeth, assessing diet versus diagenesis. And this is really important because when you're looking at stable isotopes in teeth, you can do things like going, oh, it has this amount of carbon, this amount of nitrogen. That means it was eating these plants. Or if it's a theropod, a predatory theropod, you go, that means it was eating herbivores that were eating these plants. You know, the Tyrannosaurus Rex person I know, so you can call me a beardo weirdo. I resent it though. Gosh, people bullying me in the chat. People I know bullying me in the chat. So this one's important with the diagenesis versus diet thing though, because like I was saying, you can do the isotopes and figure out kind of what they were eating, but also because they're underground for a long time and there's a lot of chemical processes happening, diagenesis can come into effect and change the isotopes. So this is mostly looking at the Oldman Formation, which is hopefully, yeah, there we go. The Oldman Formation is basically the same thing, but up in Canada, as opposed to like Judith River, Two Medicine Formations. So yeah, they're basically the same thing. There's a lot of rocks that go across the border that are called different things on different parts of the border, which is a little funny and inconsistent at times, but it's what it is. Regardless, looking at this, it seems like some of these isotopes, you have your general metallic isotopes that are going to be found in different kinds of plants at different rates. There are some similarities. There was a suggestion in this paper that Tyrannosaurids in the Oldman Formation specifically may have been predating more specifically on ceratopsids, but they because there's so much variation in the isotopes of the herbivores, there may have just been environmental shifts overall at different times, which cause, sorry, I'm just laughing at the chat talking about Albertosaurus versus Gorgosaurus. But there may have been different changes in the environment, which means they may have at different times selected different foods, which would also give a false impression of what the theropods are eating because there's different foods popping around. You can also see some of these plots for the different amounts of the calcium in the teeth that you have in ceratopsids versus tyrannosaurids. Again, it's a lot of chemical analyses. Again, this is going to be strontium versus calcium. There was one that I thought was this one. Sorry, this with the hard drive crashing, it's been a minute since I wrote these ones. Regardless, it is potentially, was it this one? Yeah. Potentially it is this one where the ceratopsids are having this much greater variation than the tyrannosaurids. And that could be due to the density of the enamel, where it seems like the ceratopsids had less dense enamel, less dense enamel, which means it was more porous, which means you could get other elements percolating into the tooth, changing parts of that, and causing, this kind of variation where you have this huge variation in the ceratopsid teeth and less variation in the tyrannosaurids. So there's issues because they estimate that there could be between 60 and 85% of the strontium in the teeth, which again, if we go back to here, strontium in the teeth may be due just to diagenesis, which means if you are measuring these and trying to use strontium to say something about diet, you're going to run into problems, because if 60% of it is not original, minimum, that's not going to be ideal for your analysis. In Fruita, Colorado, there's the Horse Thief Canyon. Yeah, I've heard of that one. There's a number of various horse-named fossil sites. Or Blank Canyon fossil sites, rather. So yeah, that's that one. Just basically, isotopes can be really hard to do because sometimes you get a lot of variation. This one is looking at like basically just the last decade of paleontology, and not even from a strictly scientific standpoint. It looked from 2014 to 2023 at 12,104 publications. Of those, 8,336 are describing a new animal, 34.72% are fish, 29.76% are reptiles, birds are 7.39%, amphibians are 2.8%. They also look at, kind of the gender makeup of this. It's a lot of dudes. It's a lot of people in the Northern Hemisphere. It's things that we know as far as the general makeup of where research is coming from. But at least now we have the numbers, so we can try and be more equitable in the future, make sure we're developing all of these areas so we can get fossils out of these areas with people who know that land better than we will. That way we can try and really get some of these the research to be a little bit more complete and holistic as a full understanding of the science. Okay, not understanding something someone said. The more diversity of herbivores, the teeth of the T-Rex look differently. Yeah, so it's not even necessarily the teeth of the herbivores. It's the Tanita in the chat is asking, so the more diversity of herbivores, the teeth of T-Rex will look differently. It's not that they'll look differently, it's that they will have different isotopes based on what the herbivores are eating. And so what that means is if you have an herbivore that's eating mostly like super woody plants, like some people have said maybe hadrosaurs were doing, it's going to have a different isotopic composition than something that's eating cycad ferns, for example, like the ceratopsians might have been doing. Yeah, that's basically what you're running into. Is it's the isotopes of it, but the ceratopsids at least have more porous enamel than tyrannosaurid teeth, which means that gets changed. So it's not a perfect one-to-one ratio of, well, we have this in the ceratopsids and we have this in the tyrannosaurs, therefore this. It's we have this in the ceratopsids and it was changed a whole bunch, and then we have this in the tyrannosaurids and it was changed a little bit, and can we relate those at all? So it just makes the science a little more complicated. This one is looking at Calypsosuchus. This is from Will Reyes' PhD that he just finished. Great guy. But it's just a redescription of this older fossil that we already know exists. It's a Phaneodosaur, which is basically an herbivorous land croc. It's technically branched off before modern crocodilians, but it's closely related. It has some of the same traits as far as like the ancestral hip structure, osteoderms, and whatnot. Someone in the chat is going, more research from what was Appalachia would be nice. Yeah, it would be. It's hard to do that though, because it's just, there's not a ton of Cretaceous rocks out there. Unfortunately, just the way that Appalachia is built is not really conducive to it being good for dinosaur preservation. There's some stuff though. Yeah, this is a Pseudosuchian. This is the Eodosaurs. They are a branch of the Pseudosuchians that are, well, I say herbivorous. There's more and more evidence that they were much more omnivorous and would still, snack on whatever. And that includes some of what Will Reyes has worked on elsewhere. But these are really useful in biostratigraphy because you can find them in different places. So basically, the Dockham group would have been, kind of a mountain range here. So the Dockham group is just the other side of it. But basically, we find Chile formation has Calypsosuchus wellesi, and then so does the Dockham group. So we're actually able to go, okay, well, these should be approximately equal because we're finding the same species on both sides of this. And hypothetically, it also means they should be in here somewhere in New Mexico. We just haven't found them yet. Unless they were going all the way around here, all the way south and around this mountain range that kind of would have been in here somewhere. So yeah, this is starting to correlate some of these rock units with the Chile Formation, various parts of the Dockham group, and then hypothetically again, parts of New Mexico, but we need to find one there so we can say, hey, look at this, we know how old it is. Which, admittedly, this is a new description of this, it's a redescription of it, which means if someone finds just this bit of it, you know, this little maxillary bit, maybe they can go, hey, it's this, but in New Mexico, so we do have this. So it's a paper that's really good for making predictions about what we should find in other places. This is a fun one that I know a lot of people got excited about. This is Trudon, and it's basically, Trudon is a tooth. The holotype of Trudon is a tooth. There's been more material found, and it's described to Stenonychosaurus. And a lot of people like Trudon because it's just been more famous than Stenonychosaurus. However, since it's a tooth, it's not really valid. This paper is basically going, hey, Trudon has been used a whole bunch. We have new material at Museum of the Rockies. We are going to just call this the new holotype, so it's a neotype of Trudon, and make that valid over Stenonychosaurus and a number of other things, right? And it is decent material, right? Like you get some of these maxillary pieces. You have adult, juvenile, and embryonics, because Trudons have laid their eggs in somewhere that's really good for fossilization. So you get some of these really small pieces out here. So there is really decent material for Trudon, Stenonychosaurus. But yeah, and so the big part basically is, hey, look, we did all these measurements. Here's all this new material. Send it off to the International Convention of Zoological Nomenclature, the ICZN. And then the ICZN can go, well, is it worth it to keep Stenonychosaurus or Trudon as a name, or should they name it something else? And seemingly they're going, yeah, well, you could name that Trudon. So yeah, nice little arctometastarsal there. I know some people in the chat like arctometastarsals. It's when this middle foot bone gets really pinched up here. But yeah, I mean, then it's just going through the measurements of all this material and saying, hey, we should do Trudon as its own thing, which is fair enough. I mean, I still think Stenonychosaurus is a better name, but that's just me because I'm a contrarian. Yeah, Pectinodon is another one of those teeth where it's, oh, it can be easily identified as Pectinodon, and it's like, yeah, but that's fairly rare for teeth. So Lazarus effect, Lazarus taxa are basically just like, oh, it goes extinct, and then, you know, you find one 30 million years, 40 million years later. But this is specifically looking at a lot of these bivalves, which the bivalves die out in this freshwater environment, but then they show up later. So potentially what happened is, in this particular environment, oh, I wouldn't need to sign in for this one. I'll just draw it. Hopefully, where's the whiteboard? There's a whiteboard. We're gonna jump in on me. Hang on. There we go. So, you know, you have your river system or whatever, right? And there's all these, I don't want to use the green, there we go. You know, happy little clams in there. I'm just going to draw circles because I'm not the best artist. But what it seems like happened is, while this was still a river, the ocean was over here. And the ocean crept in some, but not all the way, so it became somewhat more salty. And that would have caused the brief extinction of these. However, they still survived somewhere else in one of these various lakes or whatever that would have been out here, like an oxbow lake that could have just been like right here, little lake. There's still some there. And then eventually, as the sea went back, they were able to still continue surviving and pop back into the fossil record, more or less. So it's basically, hey, yeah, we know all these freshwater bivalves from the Crato Formation, where a lot of these really nice fossils come from. Things like some other pterosaurs from South America. I believe irritators from the Crato Formation. So, hey, look, we have this great understanding of it, but then also we are seeing that there's this extinction that happens as the ocean comes in, and then it reverts. So, do that. And let's see, are there images I can get just from this? Because that would help as well. Yeah, there you go. This will be the. So yeah, you can see here, you have these kind of sandstone rivery things. You start getting this mud and ocean stuff coming in. Sandstone again. And then there's your Lazarus taxa, where essentially, hey, look, they're down here, they die out, they come back. But just having an actual study of how exactly a Lazarus taxa can occur is good, because while this is a relatively short time frame, it does mean it could be applied to longer time frames, and why we don't see things for a while and then suddenly they pop up again. And since it's a controlled, fairly consistent stratigraphic section, it is very nice for just being able to, like, here's a controlled environment in which we can test this. It's a very important part for science. Open access, cool. Okay. Moving on, staying in the water, we have Dibango volans, which is a newly named fish, but it's already a fairly well-known fish because it is bizarre. Here it is. It has, these big fins. Its long body here. It's a strange guy. As we go down, there's another specimen. They have a life reconstruction at the bottom, I believe. There we go. Anyway, so yeah, this is basically what they're interpreting this fossil Dibango volans as. The skull isn't fully fused, which is something that's pretty consistent in juvenile animals. It is not a massive fish, 33 to 56 millimeters, so 2 or 3 inches, right? 56 would be, what, 5 centimeters, 5.6 centimeters. So yeah, 2 or 3 inches. It's not a massive animal. And it seems like it's a deep sea fish, just based on the general slow moving stuff. But it's from the Bolka Lagerstadt, which is very much a shallow ocean deposit. And there's also moonfish there, these are fossil moonfish that are morphologically similar to deep sea ones, but it has the soft tissue patterns of shallow water fish. Basically, you can tell kind of where a fish was living based on the patterns, just because of how the camouflage works when you're in the ocean. So there's really weird conditions here, basically. For some reason, you're getting all kinds of fish that morphologically we would expect to be in the open ocean or deep sea, and then they're showing up in shallow water places. But yeah, basically this is an adult fish that, as far as we can tell, basically just kept all of its juvenile characteristics. So it's a strange thing. That would be a great what the hell. Yeah, this one I could dive into a lot more on what it is. Honestly, that whole Lagerstadt's pretty interesting. It's like one of the best fish places in the world. Odd fish to say the least. Deep sea fish. You haven't missed too much. No, we've been going for about 30 minutes and I've gone through a handful of papers. For Scared Thief who just came in. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were saying it's an adult. I may be incorrect. But that was my understanding. Which, again, it's been a minute since I've read these papers, because, again, hard drive crashed. So I may be making a mistake there. Don't perfectly quote me on it. Here we go. So yeah, this one's going to be a new petrified palm. It's Palmoxylon trachycarpensiae. This one's interesting because of where it is in the intertrapian beds of the Deccan. So when I talked about, like, massive amounts of volcanism, here I can draw again. Where is there we go. And so this actually works pretty well. So the intertrapian beds are, you have this massive amount of volcanism in India during the latest Cretaceous. So you get these big basalt beds, big volcanic rock beds. These are all, really hard rocks. But then there's periods where the volcanism stops. And in there you get, these kind of river systems that flow through, and they lay down, like, little sandstones and whatnot. And then you get another patch of volcanism. And so these reds are the intertrapian beds. Well, that was a bad arrow. I did not point where I meant to. These red beds are going to be the intertrapian beds, meaning essentially they preserve what happened after the volcano stopped, but while there was still a lot of geological activity happening. And in one of those, there is this palm, which is interesting because when we think about palms, there are a lot in Southern Asia. And, there's all kinds of fossils of them. But basically, this is showing that the ones in Southern Asia got there from India, and that makes sense because the palms that we do have are still more diverse in the southern continents, meaning that essentially they evolved by the time that India was totally separate from Africa, but not yet to Southern Asia. It had not yet caused the rise of the Himalayas. So yeah, it's neat to find this because it's basically, okay, we're figuring out more of the biogeography of palm trees, essentially. Oh, that does not stick there. Yeah, my headphones. Yeah. So yeah, that's what we got going on there. Cool. Next one. Okay, and this one is patterns of fusion in the Emu and in Troodon now. And I say jump to figure 14, so I need to jump way down. 10. Here we go. So this is basically looking at how different bones fuse, and it gives you a great example of kind of how they did do this as they grow. So basically when they get to maximum femur length is the 100%. And as you're doing that, you can look through the different fossils. Palm trees. Sorry, going back to Milo in the chat. But basically, okay, so you're starting to fuse some of these neck and tail bones together, some of these back vertebrae together. Start doing that with the axis, which is going to be one of the upper neck bones, the sternum, which is going to be in the chest, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see at least some of these things that we have enough fossils to say for are happening at, I would say, similar times, but they're a bit later, if that makes sense. They happen in a similar order, but not at the same time. You have to wait for the individuals to become larger before you start getting some of these fusions. Especially when you start getting into, your sacral fusions, which is going to be your hips, which does start here, but it's a little shorter in the juvenile to subadult stage. The atlas is another one of those neck bones, again, happening when it's larger, but it happens all the way up until it does reach adult size. And then your sacrum's still way back here, as opposed to your synsacrum, which is more fusion of bones happening further back. So yeah, similar, different age rates, it seems. Yeah, and Tyrannosaurus Rex in the chat is saying, would expect some interesting convergences between such a derived theropod and a modern avian. I agree. It'd be really interesting to do this with some of the, with either one of the good Rhamphorhynchus growth rates we have and see kind of what's fusing there, or with, just to see how far back it goes, if it is just ancestral to all of, Ornithodira, or to do it with some of the, J-hole biota birds. Yeah, birds evolve their tail into what's called a pygostyle or pygostyle, depending on who you are, where essentially they have the long dinosaur. I'm going to jump back to me again. so I can gesture at the camera. They have the long dinosaurian tail, but as you get closer to birds, they kind of shorten it, and then they get this nub at the very end of it, which allows them to have a whole fan of feathers. In non-bird dinosaurs, they don't have that pygostyle. Most of them don't. Some of them evolved it convergently. But that's why when you see like something like Troodon being drawn, there's going to be a V at the end of the tail, because they weren't able to put feathers all the way around as a tail fan. Which is just one really neat little part of anatomy. Anyway, so yeah, just looking at this, we can try and understand how these things grew differently. And again, it's similar but different. This is another one of those examining paleontology as a field type papers. Employment in paleontology. It's bad, folks. Lots of people want to do paleontology. There are not a lot of jobs. Funding is bad. Funding is getting worse. This includes biology and geology positions, because there are both. But overall, you're finding a very selective amount of people who are gonna be in there, especially when you're looking at like who's employed that is a early career student. Very few of them are getting employed, which is rough. This is via Society of Urban Paleontology, so student members, early career members. It's not ideal. Okay, back in the chat, I see chest very snubbed. Most of the muscle has been pushed into the hip, and the knee became more important. Yeah. The movement of the hind limb musculature of dinosaurs, both non-bird and bird, are very different. Like if you ever take apart a chicken, you'll see how the thigh bone is like almost integrated with the muscle into the side of the body wall. Because they just kind of lock that in place so that they can use the knee to drive movement more. Shortened tail on the implications of what the way birds walk compared to dinosaurs. Almost certainly, yeah. Need more funding in the sciences overall? Yes. Do paleontologists at least have good salaries? They have salaries. In general, it's academia. You're going in because you love the field, not because you want to get paid a whole bunch. There are things you can do that will pay better, like doing mitigation, which is basically you work for a construction company to make sure they're not destroying fossils when they're digging things up. So, yeah, there's it is rough job prospects. Unionids are fun. They're this family of clams that are really, really common and tell you that yes, this is definitely freshwater. They have 2 new genera and some freshwater species in Brazil. I do not have access to this one. It's been a while since I've done this, so I forgot some of the process. But again, they're pretty common types of clams. But these are the oldest ones that have been found in South America, and really importantly, they're related to the African species. So, cool. We can say that as the continents were splitting, there was still at least some flow of some freshwater animals between that. It wasn't necessarily just all instantly saltwater as this gap opened up. Just like archaeology pay is dire and low on the subcontractor list. Yeah. So yeah, basically just, hey, look, new clams. We can see some of these connections between South America and Africa, which sounds really minor, but when you have invertebrates, it is much easier to do that because you get an actually like statistically relevant sample as opposed to 3 animals. Oh, come on, load. Sorry, I'm waiting for the next one to load. So this is the plants that are related to things like ivies, ginseng, other ornamental plants. This is from the South American The Eocene of South America, South American Eocene. That's what I was trying to say. God. Um, anyway, what this does suggest is those are very common in parts of Eastern Eurasia right now. What this is suggesting is during the Eocene, you had enough birds to actually like be likely that they were flying decent distances, and so it seems likely that these would have been transported by birds, especially since that's how a lot of their seeds are being transported today. So basically, it's Eocene, anywhere from 10 to 20 million years after the extinction that killed off the non-bird dinosaurs, and you're already starting to get some of these kind of very modern ecosystem relations. Clams can make for good dating fossils at times. For example, in the Chinle Formation, I know that there's one specific bed that is packed full of Unionids. And so that's the Gym Camp wash beds. And so it's like, oh, you see this? You know where you are in the overall Chinle Formation. Wonderful. As far as other dating, there can be. The problem is for a good index fossil, you need something that's very distinctly a specific species that only existed for a short amount of time. Overall, right? Like I'm trying to think some of the graptolites. It's like, yeah, this one was around. There were a bunch of interglacial periods, so it was around for a short time during the interglacial and then died out, and then there was another interglacial, and a new species of graptolite evolved to fill in that interglacial for a very short amount of time. So you really want things that are there for a very short amount of time. Anyway, nice plant preservation. You know, we're able to see some of this, some of this damage on it too from various insects and such. Seed pods that would have been most likely fed upon by birds and transported by birds. So yeah, like it's tracking with everything we know about these plants today. It makes sense. And now going to Canada. We have the new elasmosaur, yay. I don't have access to this one. Where is its name? There we go. But yeah, this is an elasmosaur that comes from that's an awful image. That comes from British Columbia in Canada. And so it's actually from Vancouver Island. It's, you know, this fossil that's been known about for ages that people are like, oh yeah, it's basically Canada's elasmosaur, or at least British Columbia's elasmosaur. And no one's really done anything with it. It's finally been described. It's probably an early branching elasmosaurid, rather than, you know, one of the super late ones like Elasmosaurus, I believe, is later. But also a lot of these early elasmosaurs come from Australia. British Columbia, famously, not in Australia. So it does seem like they were able to make it around the world pretty quickly. It doesn't seem super related to those ones in Australia as well, which means there might just be a longer lasting ghost lineage, and the reason we just get a bunch of them in Australia is because Australia was covered by this big oceanic basin in the middle of it, so it makes it easier to find those kinds of things. But yeah, Trascasaura is that one there. All right, and so bryophytes are basically all of the low-lying plants that don't really have like vascular systems to grow very tall. Mosses, liverworts, hornworts. If I jump to images, hopefully there will be one. Yeah, and so they basically spread by sporing that eventually grows into it. It's a very, they need wet environments overall. Anyway, so this paper is basically looking at like how do the biases in the fossil record help us understand this. Accounting for this, they found there should have been a 30% increase, or there was a 30% increase in the stuff older than the Miocene for bryophytes, which is a kind of big deal because as you get closer to the modern day, as you get closer to the modern day, you're going to get better fossil records just because there's been less time for it to get absolutely pulverized by geologic forces, especially with something like a bryophyte. I'm talking about these small plants. They do not hold together well. In the chat, Diana, don't worry about it. No worries. Yeah. Yeah, I for Tyrannosaurus Rex on the previous paper, yes, I was reading through my notes and I misinterpreted my notes because, as I had said earlier, my hard drive crashed and I was trying to remember all of these papers from when I wrote this stuff a little while ago. Anyway, yeah, there's a northern hemisphere bias on bryophytes, like there is with almost anything. Wish we knew more, but it's just where we're at because these are kind of the first plants to really start getting on land. Then we jump into the Go-Go Formation. The Go-Go Formation is this wonderful, beautiful marine Lagerstatt. There are fossils of fish with the embryos and the embryonic, the cord. I forgot what it's called now. Connecting the two individuals. So like crazy good preservation. It's mostly 3D. But anyway, they have a fossil here, a few fossils, where they're able to say, hey, look at the way that these fins are paired. And it suggests that these bony fish, these arthrodires that have these big bony plates, had differently shaped fins than what we previously thought. Therefore, we need to really reconsider our reconstructions of them. The thing is, they're a pretty diverse group, the arthrodires, so it's really hard to say that. Okay, off topic, but people have mixed opinions on whether reptiles are closer to mammals or amphibians. What are your thoughts? They are closer to mammals. The amphibians thing is a historical relic of the Victorian era, where it was herpetology, and it basically just means things that are crawling on the ground and are losers because mammals are just so much better. It is very much a leftover of that kind of thinking, which is not scientific thinking in the modern sense. Mammals and reptiles are not amphibians. Amphibians separated out from tetrapods like Tiktaalik, and then the amniotes also separated out from them separately. The amniotes then split into reptiles and amphibians. So yeah, that's... Yeah, so amniotes have what's an amniotic egg, right? So you can think of reptile eggs, you can think of platypus eggs. It is a hard-shelled egg that does not need to remain wet the entire time. That's part of, what is it? Oh, when you say you... Okay, jumping again into the chat. Milo, when you're saying human arrogance, you mean that, hey, everything's incorrect because we have this one fish with different, with different fins? Diana, I also agree. Reptiles and amphibians are so great. I love seeing reptiles and amphibians. I need to go look for some snakes or something soon before it gets too cold, because it's getting there. Yeah, there's some oddball ideas out there as far as lost common ancestors, and maybe they're right. The thing is, it would take really, really incredible evidence to show that. So I doubt we're going to be able to show that there was some sort of other type of egg. Oh, the mammals being superior to every other clade thing. Yeah, that arrogance as well. Ends the age of man, enter the age of the frog. I doubt there's going to be age of the frog. Frogs just don't. They're not doing so hot right now. And you really need that biodiversity to develop into things. So yeah, that's the Go-Go Formation fish. Again, it has different fins, and you can see in one of those images I just had up. There you go. Where here's the fin where it's structured differently than what we see in modern fish. So yeah, sure, the fins might be different, but it doesn't necessarily change the overall structures. The arthrodires, were very diverse. Some were a little bit more eel-like, almost, longer and thinner, and likely living along reefs. Meanwhile, you have things like Dunkleosteus, which was swimming in the open ocean and probably shaped more or less like a shark. So it's really hard to just say, hey, look, we have this one, therefore all. There's some frog infection killing them. Yeah, it's the chytrid fungus. The chytrid fungus, because frogs need to remain wet because they're amphibians, right? They will lose water through their skin very rapidly. This chytrid fungus can grow on them really well, and it basically scars the skin and makes it so that they cannot. Yeah, it's a fungus. I mean, it was as long as some sharks. Sorry. So this fungus gets on the skin and it basically starts to scar the skin, and that as much as I say they need to remain wet, there's also still a lot of regulation with different oxygen and stuff through their skin. So it basically suffocates the frog by getting onto their skin and disallowing them from absorbing certain things that they need to. Frog got to my office window recently and have no idea how it got there when we're so far from a water body. See, the thing is, you say far from a water body. You didn't say it's dry. And some toads can also get inland pretty well. But frogs are really interesting. Sorry, I'm going very off topic from this. Let me jump on me. So frogs are really interesting because they do still have a wide variety of lifestyles. For example, you do have toads that are slightly thicker skinned, so they can survive more in deserts and things. But you also have things like the canyon tree frog, which doesn't really live on trees that much because it lost its toe pads. I think it lost its toe pads. But it lives in like these canyons in Arizona that do have water coming through them at times, but otherwise they just like kind of sit in cracks and rocks and just go, all right, I'm waiting for the rain. So they can be fairly stable over long periods of time as long as it's not too dry. And it doesn't need to be super moist. It just needs to be moist enough. So if there's grass or something that's being watered, that could very well be enough water for a frog to hang around. Okay, moving back to the science. Do that and go back up here. So this is fossil woods that were collected. The thing is, these were lost. So we have no idea what they are. It's basically, hey, we described this thing. They all got lost. We don't know where they went. They were found again, which is nice. Basically what they're able to show is, hey, this isn't Araucarioxylon australe. Instead, it's going to be a new plant. It's a Planoxylon, specifically Planoxylon toitoi. It's nice that fossil woods are coming so far. It is showing that there's this entirely new group of gymnosperms, which is going to be things like pines, cedars, cycads, and such, right? That are actually fairly successful and have been successful in Gondwana, so in the southern continents. We just kind of haven't worried about them because, oh yeah, we have our woods. It's basically the same stuff as everything we already know. Don't worry about it. And then you go and look at it and it's like, oh, look, there is all kind of new fossil woods. And you can kind of see like, the cell structures in here and how they can be very different from some of the other cell structures that do get preserved. Which is just, it got replaced by silicon. That's kind of how you're able to get that fine of detail. This is a fun one with birds. This is, I know I had access to this. I just keep forgetting to, forgot to sign in. Here's the nice artwork with it. But essentially there's these little mound traces that are evidence of birds nesting in the Arctic, so above the Arctic Circle. Today, in the modern day, you can think of things like the Arctic tern, which literally goes pole to pole. So some birds were probably at least doing that. What's interesting is there are bird tracks in southern Australia, which also would have been very close to the Arctic Circle. Oh yeah, hey, someone in here has been digging in the Prince Creek Formation where these are from. Anyway, the the tracks in southern Australia also seem to be separated by different layers, which suggests they were migrating there seasonally. And maybe the same thing was happening in the northern hemisphere, where birds would come up to these, more cold environments when it was warm in the summers, and then leave during the winter. But yeah, it's like, look, birds very early on are doing basically what we expect. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tyrannosaurus Rex in the chat. Prince Creek is about 70 million years old. Yeah, he'll catch up and get there. But anyway, yeah, so we have these nesting traces that they were coming up here specifically to nest, and do pretty well. And you can see, I think this is from this one. Oh no, this is just from the other dinosaurs that nested there. I wish there was better images for it. It might be just little pieces of egg killer bone too. But yeah, it's nice to be like, oh yeah, it's 73 million years old now. Okay, but still, you're very late Cretaceous kind of environments. You have birds doing very modern bird things, and potentially, who knows, right? Like, this could be part of the reason some birds may have made it, right? If they're already used to nesting in somewhat cold conditions, maybe the impact that killed off the rest of the dinosaurs, they were able to adapt to it, while also being able to travel longer distances to find food, as opposed to dinosaurs, which were a little bit more sedentary. Even if they did migrate, it would take longer too. Nyanosaurus is your favorite dubious dinosaur? Tyrannosaur? Yeah. Dubious genera. Personally, I don't think Tyrannosaurs exist. It's all Manispondylus. Deep cut for you. So this is actually interesting as well. This one is basically plants that were, or algae that were evolving to be more like plants at about the right time, and that this is the Ordovician. Those are fighting words, Zeke. You're attacking me because I said Tyrannosaurus is actually Manispondylus. That's all Deinodon. Yeah. Going back into the 1800s, there's plenty of material that's named from almost nothing. I believe somebody here has actually looked at some of that other remains outside of the holotype. Anyway, so yeah, this is Taramochara miraculensis, this is an algae that is a lot like a plant, and we know at some point plants evolved out of green algae. This is in the Ordovician. This is before land plants really started to exist. It's maybe around that time. There's a handful of spores released by, as I was talking about before, bryophytes. They do spores as opposed to seeds. A handful of fossil spores from around this time in Turkey, Argentina, and Australia. But this is the first time we have like a body type fossil of it. And I believe, yeah. You can see, okay, here's some of these spores, right? And then you start getting some of these, your more classic plant material. Can I make this larger if I open image in new tab? Yeah, I can. Cool. Yeah, your more classic plant material, your cell walls and such. So it's still an algae. It is closer to plants, and it is evidence of plants starting to have evolved during this time. So yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, like first land plants, almost, kind of adjacent. So yeah, that's really exciting. This is on ResearchGate, and I actually know one of these authors. I thought I did. There's more than one author. I mean, that's all that's on ResearchGate right now. Yeah, so I know Will. Will's my diabetic paleontology buddy. But basically, screen washing can be a pain in the butt, especially if you're trying to screen wash for microfossils and it's clay. Because clay, when it gets wet, gets so sticky, you kind of need to keep it moving. Basically, what they did is set up a solar panel in order to keep agitating this, in order to, again, they use a kiddie pool. It's a very cheap setup other than the solar panels. But it keeps circulating the water so you can continually move things to the side and get the water to go out and the clay to go out to the outside of the boxes. And that way you can be left with actually just the fossils that aren't going to have a thick layer of clay all over them. Dinosaurs smell bad, but not as bad as mammals. Diameter, okay. Yeah. There's a lot of taxonomy works that needs to happen in Tyrannosaurs. Anyway, yeah, I know one of the authors on this. I know Will. But it's basically a way to sieve clay, because mudstone versus clays can behave very different just because of the way clay is so sticky to itself. Yeah, so it's a very useful thing for finding more microfossils in the future, hopefully. Next one is a big review paper, so I can't get all through it. Basically, it's what is every fossil cat that's been found in Europe, at least from the Pliocene to Pleistocene. And it goes through, you have your more saber-tooth, Homotherium type cats, cave lions and such, right? There is a very large variety. And like I said, they do a whole review. There's a lot that needs to be done to resolve some of the phylogeny of some of these and the identity of some of these, because a lot of these were named so long ago that it's kind of just throw it in with the lion, the cave lion. Oh yeah, just throw it in with this other thing. So needs to be some better work done, but they have a good variety of big cats from Europe, which is not something we think about being in Europe anymore, right? This is despite the fact that 1,000 years ago there were still lions in Greece. So, unfortunately, Europe is not as wild as it had used to be. When you wash deep sea mudstones with pressure washer to get the forams out, it looks infuriatingly like hot chocolate. Well, let me know, and I can send you that paper, because you might be able to use that method to see if you can actually get them out a little better. Methods papers are so important. It's really not not every paper, and we talk about it. I talked about it earlier in that paper that was doing a review of paleontology. Not every paper needs to be, we found a new dinosaur or a new amphibian or a new bird or whatever. Sometimes you can just be, this is how we did this really neat thing. Other people should also use this method. It is very good to do that. All right, jumping back to the Cambrian, the Unanozoans. There we go. Search. Can I not search? No, because it treats it as a link. And that's not letting me copy paste properly. Do it that way. There we go. They are these weird little fish-like things. Haiku-ichthyes, for example, is one of these. I thought dinosaur fossils are more difficult to be found in Europe. Europe has a decent number of dinosaur fossils, but that's also because that's where a lot of exploration has been. So it's hit or miss, kind of. Anyway, jumping back to this, these are probably the, not quite vertebrates, but close to it. This one basically took, it took the fossils of some modern vertebrates that have a lot of cartilage, right? And compressed them under geological conditions to kind of see what parts of the cartilage and such would be left. And basically they found, okay, well, the way that these modern day animals were preserved when we compressed them, they went, yeah, it basically preserves the same way as these fossils did. Therefore, these fossils are probably pretty similar to modern vertebrates as far as at least the way the cartilage is structured. Mycosaurus was the first ever discovered. It's in Europe. Sorry, going back to dinosaurs. Pickling tray used for assessing microfossils. Oh, this is about methods papers being good. Use a picking tray that you use for assessing microfossils in peat was designed in a methods paper, and I had to get it custom made. Oh wow. Yeah, doing the forum stuff is really impressive. Like the patience to look at, you know, microscopic things and figure out what that means about the climate is insane. Like that is detailed work. Okay, so yeah, this is cool because like, okay, yes, these things are almost certainly stem vertebrates. Again, our algal fossils is going to be hopefully in here. You can see some of these kind of multicellular algae where the algae has started to collect together. I know a lot of people go, well, how did multicellularity evolve? What likely happened is it would have been near enough shore that currents could drag things around, but if you settled on the bottom, it could stay stationary better. And if you attach more cells, you're going to sink faster and stay more stationary. That's basically what probably happened as far as multicellularity in these algae. But this is 0.95 billion years old, so 950 million years old. This kind of, based on genetics, this kind of multicellularity evolved about, based on genetics, the separation between multicellular and non-multicellular algae is about 1.4 billion years ago. And, you know, based on the genetics, again, that kind of multicellularity separated then. And so it seems like maybe that wasn't convergent. Maybe multicellularity is as old as 1.4 billion years old, but then just, you know, they diversified and this is the first fossil we get of them because algae does not fossilize well under most conditions. It doesn't require much patience to do forum stuff. I just learned a few hundred species and then I can turn my brain off and watch anime while I pick them. Fun. Yeah, multicellularity in seaweeds and algae is really interesting. Multicellularity in general is really interesting. This is jumping into closer to a modern fossil, actually, and that we can name it to a modern species, Crotalus durissus, which is the tropical rattlesnake. We also have Epicrates, which is a kind of boa. Tropidurus is ground lizards. There's also vaguely some sort of teid. So if you think of like the Argentine tegu or whiptail lizards, those are teids. Crocodile lizards also closely related. But these are all coming from a cave in, I believe a cave, right? Or a small, yeah, it's a ravine. There you go, a ravine of dissolved limestone. I was right that there was dissolved limestone. I was wrong about what form it took. So hopefully, yeah, and a lot of this is just very partial sorts of things, but basically here's the limestone that got eroded away, filled in with mud, had some other stuff happen, filled in with more mud, and then, you know, you have your different horizons where you do get these fossils, but yeah, it's basically a fairly common, a fairly modern fossil representation of what is there today, except for at least the teids aren't there today, so there are still some changes. So as people are able to find more stuff here, we'll be able to look a little bit more at kind of how the change in the environment happened. If you love a good lizard site, go look out this stuff that, what is it, Hall's Cave, I think it is, in Texas. The winner of the SVP student talked about fossils from there and comparing it to modern day communities, and it was a really interesting talk, and they published on it just a while ago. I don't remember their last name, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would give you that as well. Lizards. Lizards are great. This is another review. This is foothills of the Himalayas, basically. So this is in Pakistan, but it's the Sewaliks, which is this mountain range. It's, again, it's the foothills of the Himalayas, right? Here's the Himalayas. You got this. You got all this stuff out here. Again, big review. There's a lot of stuff. The Miocene climatic optimum meant that a lot of this area was floodplain, but it was limited because it was so much warmer than it had been. You're not getting as much constant wetness on the floodplain as you would have otherwise expected. This is the number of localities, so obviously we're finding a lot of these things at around 10 to 9 million years ago, whereas we're missing a lot of the early parts of this kind of deposition, unfortunately. Because hypothetically also, this could be right in the kind of time period where cats are starting to show up more commonly. So that would be unfortunate, because hypothetically cats could have come from this part of Asia. So some of the first cats could be in here, and we just don't know yet. Then we have, there's your geology rather, of different phases coming into each other, where you have some sandstones and mudstones and whatnot running into each other. There's 201. Here's everything that's been found. There was one other thing I wanted to find. There you go. Occurrences by what kind of group it is, right? So your oranges, you get a lot of rodents. Your reds, you get a lot of carnivorans. Artiodactyls, your artiodactyls are two-hooved, so your deer and such. Perissodactyls are your horses and such. So nice little graph of kind of what's coming out of this area. Appreciate you joining the Discord as well. Make sure my wife's not messaging me that I need to do anything, or that anything's wrong with the stream. Not that I see there. That's just okay, cool. Okay, and now we have more Ediacarans from before the Cambrian. Oh, yep. Okay, right one. Yeah, so they're from the Urals in Russia. It is a high-res image, right? Yeah, there you go. It's just little, body shapes. So we can go, yeah, it's some sort of organism. This looks like it's probably Kimberella, which might be the first mollusk. There's some debate about that, but it very well could be. Kimberella is not a super... right, yeah. It is not the world's most interesting fossil organism, other than maybe being related to one of these huge groups of mollusks, right? Being the first mollusk, maybe. Oh yeah, so they just go through the whole thing. It's just another Ediacaran site. A lot of those are pretty similar. Dinosaur database, peace out. As you say, adios. Here we go. This is going to be fossils from Iraq. Wait, no, it's the Iraqi journal, but this is Morocco. That's what it is. I'm like, wait a minute. But this is the phosphate series. So when you hear about, oh, this mosasaur comes from the Moroccan phosphates, this is what it is. Basically, they do all the stratigraphy and such for it, where we actually have a good understanding of what the different layers are. Kimberella does seem to have pretty similar anatomy to chitons on its underside. Yeah, and chitons are also... Sorry, jumping back to the mollusks now. Kimberella, being similar to chitons, makes sense, because when you think... there's the idea of the ham, the hypothetical ancestral mollusk, which is basically a shell with a soft body underneath that can kind of move. And chitons are basically that, only they have a couple of extra valves in the shell. Essentially, they have 7 little segments. So, yeah, that's what's happening there. No, this is Morocco. It's just in a Iraqi journal, geological journal. So that's where I got thrown off. But anyway, going back to this paper now, this is essentially where we're finding all of these various fossils and such, showing hummocky cross stratification for kind of larger storms, your various ichnofossils, bivalves, and you can see kind of where they're measuring all the sections. And it's nice to finally have this, because now we can actually, like, hopefully start plugging these, hopefully we can start actually just plugging all of these fossils that we have from here and actually trying to understand what part of it they come from, as opposed to just, oh, it's a mosasaur tooth from here that is being named a totally new species, or whatever you have. Also, they do a lot of mineralogy for, you know, the kind of changes that are existing through the entire formation. So yeah, it's a really good description of these rock units, so we can finally start understanding again just what's kind of existing. Fish teeth are coming in places, right? Like, you get, it's been well sampled as far as the number of fossils. You can see the erosional surface there. Yeah, it's nice to finally start, like, actually getting stuff here. Morocco can have better stratigraphy. It's finally happening. Now what we need is for people who are getting fossils from there to ask the person who found it where it came from, so they can try and at least do an estimated position of it in the stratigraphic section. Which, it's an improvement. You hope that doesn't get ignored because of the journal choice. I would agree, but, like, I think those kinds of things are still really important to have. Right? Like, it's obvious stratigraphy of the Moroccan phosphates isn't going to be a huge paper in Nature or Science. Sometimes you just need to publish it. So, yeah, it's a smaller, less impactful journal. That's the issue. This is an interesting one. So this, I'll start with the one we all know. This is a starfish. It is a echinoderm. They have five-way symmetry. This is a hemichordate. It has not five-way symmetry, but it's closely related. This is also an echinoderm, almost. It's towards the start of it, but basically what it seems like was happening is a lot of these early echinoderms essentially started moving their entire front of their body surface further forward, and then eventually just became more wrapped in this kind of a five-way symmetry. And there's a number of really odd stem echinoderms, or things closely related to echinoderms, that have this weird symmetry. And that makes sense, right? Because they are bilateral ancestrally, even echinoderms. But eventually they had to become five-way symmetric. Yeah, so it's basically finally a, hey, look, we're finally figuring some of this out. Am I going to talk about the watermelon hadrosaurs? I don't remember if I have that in here. That might be in the next one that I have written. Anyway, the fossil looks really nice. Micro CT scanned, so like you have all the detail. You can kind of see where the little foot-like appendages come from for movement. The way that, like, sea stars have, like, the tubes that they walk on. But yeah, it's a neat little weird thing, frankly, as you start getting into, again, this kind of stem group of your echinoderms into your more classic echinoderms. You can see there's a few of these that kind of start doing all this same thing before you finally get to a more starfish-like arrangement. That was that one that I just did. A new bird from the Messel Pit, Eocene of Germany, about, I want to say, I don't remember if it's 52 or 48 million years ago, but somewhere around there. This is just a single skull and some neck vertebra, or two skulls and some neck vertebra. Two skulls and some neck vertebra. But this is Enigmatorhynchus, rhynchus being, you know, essentially snout, and it does have a long snout. Rarus. And so this is the new one. It has a design that seems similar to stilts and oyster catchers, but some of the other structures suggest that it's absolutely not one of those. Especially towards the back of the skull, it seems more closely related to seabirds like the skua, which is kind of like this. Imagine a giant seagull. Let me pull up a skua for you real quick. And like again, it is basically just a seagull. It's a much larger seagull than most. So I'm gonna make a video on this. Diana says she wants to make a video on this paper. Which one? This bird one or the echinoderm one? Oh yeah. So it's neat because you're getting these birds that are going to be, you know, hanging around presumably the edge of the Messel Lake, catching various oysters, not oysters, it's freshwater, catching various clams and such, you know, probing water for worms, or probing the mud for worms and whatnot, despite being closer to seabirds, which is really neat. Like it's doing this odd thing. Is there a phylogeny in here? I don't recall. Nope. Okay. The echinoderm one, yeah. The echinoderm one is, yeah, they're neat. I just don't know enough about echinoderms to really hop straight into it for a video. And also just like lots of stuff happening. Had other papers I was getting submitted this summer. In addition to the other issues I ran into. Speed from fossil trackways calculations not validated by extant birds on compliant substrates. Basically, hey, we looked at how birds walk on different kinds of mud and stuff, and we ran into a lot of issues as far as directly comparing them. As was talked about in the chat earlier, I don't know if the Tyrannosaurus Rex character is still here, but knee-driven movement versus hip-driven movement is kind of the big thing between birds and non-bird dinosaurs. This paper got misinterpreted by journalists. I'm sure it did. Basically, when you're having the birds walk across these various muds and stuff, they will change the way they're walking anyway. So you can't necessarily trust that dinosaurs are going to be walking the same way anyway. Especially when you're just trying to like measure, oh, this is a straight line. They're not behaving perfectly well for that. Tyrannosaurus Rex, if you're still here and you want to comment on this paper, feel free to, because motion is not as much my thing. Most journalists can't read one of these papers if their lives depend on it. Yeah, basically you can't use the predictions. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's not that they were slower than you thought. It's that because of the substrate, my understanding is the equations we use don't work well on these particular substrates. Was what I believe I'm recalling for this one. So it's not ideal. I do think there are some interesting biomechanical models being made, so hopefully we'll get some better answers for this in the future. Limited to small birds, which 100% skews results. That is fair. Yeah. And I have heard people who are doing other bird traces stuff who have talked about like, yeah, I had an undergrad student who was trying to do research on like getting this bird to walk across this mud. And the bird that it was just would not move. It's like, nope, I am not getting in the mud. I am not walking. So you don't have any data from that bird. So there are struggles with, yeah, trying to match, that there are issues with trying to match different substrates to walking posture. Yeah. Yeah, there is correlation, but it's just hard to try and apply universally. Yeah. Okay. So that's what's happening there. Is this one is we can't just apply at least small birds directly to non-bird dinosaurs. So a while ago there was a paper that was, hey, none of these small-bodied ornithopods from the Morrison Formation are valid. this one is from the same authors going, well, actually, this one that we found is valid. And that is going to be Enigma Cursor Molly Borthwicke. And it's honestly moderately complete. It is funny because in the one where they say, hey, nothing is valid, they don't have distinct autapomorphies. They don't have distinct traits that are all their own. This one may or may not have one that's all its own. It's hard to say because of the preservation of it. And they just went straight back out and said, yeah, this one may or may not, but we're going to name it something anyway. Which is definitely a choice. Still, it's a at least seemingly different ornithopod from the Morrison formation. Maybe. I mean, a lot of the ornithopods are kind of poorly preserved, so we really need a better sample size, but like, you have mostly whole limbs here. I think a lot of small ornithopod work just has not been specific about, I think a lot of ornithopod work just hasn't been very specific about what makes them all distinct. The phylogeny, the character traits have not been as thoroughly studied as things in like theropods, for example, which are just more charismatic. So I think someone could go through and just do a whole new level of work on small-bodied ornithopods to find different characters that are going to be phylogenetically relevant. Speaking of phylogeny, is there a phylogeny in here? Yeah, there we go. So it's way up here, kind of towards the base of a lot of these ornithischian ornithopods. And then, you know, way down here you start getting into your pachycephalosaurians, your iguanodontians, etc. But it's just kind of one of these odd early branches. The Mongolian dragon prince. I don't recall if that's in this one or the next one. I think I wrote about it. If not, I'll have to tag it in at the end. Yeah, dinosaur postcrania remains are relatively understudied. That is very true. I know, for example, specifically with ceratopsians, there's almost no work done on the postcrania. It's almost all just head material that's studied. And it's like, that's great, but we need to do other stuff. Will there be some kind of discoveries whether or what non-avian dinosaurs would sound like? We can do things with things like Parasaurolophus and the chambers in the skull to say it could make from this tone to this tone. But that's basically it. We don't know like what kind of calls it would have been if it was like, you know, a looping call. Think about bird calls today, how many different ones there are. It's really hard to say, other than it could produce this low of a tone to this high of a tone for what the dinosaurs would have sounded like. This is also Morse information. This is all on isotopes, which I'm still missing access. But basically, hey, turns out when you look at the isotopes, you get different dinosaurs eating different things, and this uses some other fossils not from the Carnegie quarry, obviously, but this is just looking at the one quarry and going, hey, look, we have niche partitioning among some of the taller sauropods like Camarasaurus, the lower laying sauropods like Diplodocus, and some of the small ornithopods like Camptosaurus, or medium-sized ornithopods like Camptosaurus. And you can even look in things like Allosaurus, like, okay, yeah, the Allosaurus versus some of these crocs are eating different things as well. So it's basically what we expected, but again, just like getting actual stuff. You got this in that, Diana. A student made a musical instrument based on Corythosaurus's crest and skull. That's neat. Okay. This is a new Robocosaurid. This is a Stigmasaura. Robocosaurids are really interesting. Mostly eating low-lying things. Potentially even more along the water than some other things, but importantly, it would have lived alongside a lot of giant dinosaurs, and that means that it's not just, you know, competition from the titanosaurs that caused the extinction of the Robocosaurs. It seems like there was probably another cause, which is really funny because also some of the titanosaurs after the extinction of the Robocosaurs convergently evolved to be similar. But yeah, and here's your at least a little bit of the skeletal here of hips, legs, some parts of a tail. Yeah, Robocosauroids are neat. Jumping into more geology stuff, chronostratigraphy of the Triassic-Jurassic Mojave Formation in the western U.S. So they use actually magnetostratigraphy and zircons. So zircons are a mineral that contains uranium, so you can shoot lasers at it, go how much of this is turned to lead, and date it that way. Magnetostratigraphy is normally done in volcanic rocks, where basically you have the lava and there's going to be little pieces of iron in there, or magnetite in there, that are magnetic, and since it's in a liquid, they will align with the magnetic pole. The poles swap sometimes, so you can use that to kind of date when the rock would have existed. In sedimentary rocks, you can do that with magnetite, but it needs to be being transported by water so that when it settles, it's settling in the correct orientation. And that's basically what this paper did. I have the PDF, right? Yeah. Yeah, and so basically what they do find across, various parts of this is that, yes, the Mojave Formation goes across the Triassic-Jurassic boundary. So the bottom of the Mojave Formation is still Triassic. But then you get into a really thin member called the Whitmore Point member, and that is the earliest Jurassic. So as we start trying to examine things like the extinction at the end of the Triassic on land, this formation is probably going to be pretty useful. So yeah, that's nice. Able to get things dated more precisely. Yeah, there we go. I knew it was in here somewhere. Sorry. The next one. Here we go. There's the Tyrannosaur one, which apparently I don't have access to anymore. But a lot of people are aware with this one. This is Conculu. It is a relatively small Tyrannosauroid, probably near the base of Tyrannosauria, which is kind of where you get into the more famous Tyrannosaurs as opposed to just early Tyrannosaurs. And this is just before the Tyrannosaurs migrated into the US, essentially, as far as the time that it lived. There's a lot of questions about Tyrannosaurs and how they're related to one another and whatnot. Why does it have to be such a crappy photo? And you can see here compared to things like Gorgosaurus and a juvenile Gorgosaurus, I believe. But yeah, there's a lot of questions about the relationships of Tyrannosaurs within just the Tyrannosaurs. So I imagine there's going to be a lot of work being done on this. Seemingly this author, Voris, right? Yeah, Voris has been doing some of that as well. So I expect to see a lot more resolution, or at least attempts at resolution, in the Tyrannosaur family tree happening. Okay. Yeah, it has the more robust and more gracile Tyrannosaurs is kind of that near the base of the tree, where above that you start getting into the more robust ones, and before that you have a lot more of the more gracile ones. So yeah, there's some really interesting migration stuff there for sure. It'd be really interesting to put this into the data that we had done on the biogeography of Tyrannosaurs and Megaraptorans. But this got published too late. Blame Voris. Blame Jared. It's his fault. This one is looking at pterosaur feet. Pterosaur feet. So pterosaur feet, we didn't really know what the skin would look like, because a lot of the times these kinds of bones kind of get spread out, which implies they kind of decayed too much to be able to tell anything. However, now we are starting to get some scales on the bottom of some of these feet. You can see, these scales here. This is under UV light, so sometimes shining different light on it can be really, really helpful. Webbed toes for at least Ramphorhynchids. And they're really small, fine scales as well, which implies, because we do have some places where we have pterosaurs next to things like sauropods, and that's even in fairly large pterosaurs. So seemingly what happened is they just retained these really small scales, which means you need a finer mud in order to actually preserve those scales. Because we'll have scales on the sauropod foot, but not on the pterosaur foot. A lot of tax got picked on the Conculu supplementary material. Yeah, probably. Like, I don't doubt, like, Tyrannosaurs, there need to be some more thorough diagnostic patterns done on them. Anyway, yeah, and the fact that these are scaled does imply that they were moving on the ground at least a decent amount of time. And this one even, you kind of have like a pad across the rest of this bottom part of this foot. So moving around the water at least a decent amount of the time. Or around on the land at least a decent amount of the time. Enough to warrant having specifically scaly patches of skin on the bottom of the feet to help protect the hands, or hands and feet. Goodness, I know words. In order to protect it. Body size is a valid character. Yep. No, it's not. There's also a lekking site. Lekking is when certain kinds of birds will essentially get together and have their own shows and whatnot in order to try and get mates, right? It's a mating display site. There's been a few of these. There's been one of these. Now there are a few more. These are all in Colorado as far as I know, but these ones are a little bit later than the others. And so you can see here there's some of these big scrapes here across the ground, which seemingly is the dinosaur scratching at the ground in order to try and find a mate there, or otherwise impress for social selection of some variety. It may not have been mate, it could have been territorial or something. However, based on what we know of modern birds, most likely it is a lekking site for mating specifically. Giant size is one of the characters for the new holotype skull paper. Tyrannosaur researchers. Also, some preliminary reports of dinosaurs in Siberia. This is Maastrichtian, so very, very late Cretaceous. What's interesting about this is it does seem like there are some similarities to the Hatzeg Basin, which is pretty interesting still, right? Like, the Hatzeg Basin is known for being this archipelago with Hatzegopteryx and a number of dwarf dinosaurs. If this is similar from somewhere else, maybe it's still an archipelago there. Maybe dinosaurs there were just smaller for whatever reason. A lot of it's still super fragmentary, though. Like, you have a handful of teeth. You have another handful of broken teeth. You have a limb bone. 2 limb bones at least, maybe 3. So yeah, it's not super, super complete material, but it is the first reports of dinosaurs in Siberia. So hopefully something a little better turns up. People still talk about Tyrannosaurs. I know some of the people on here too. I know Brian and Colin and know Taylor a little bit. This one is interesting in that it is looking at the Cedar Mountain Formation, which is even in the more recent Walking with Dinosaurs, they do that with Utahraptor and go, Utahraptor's the biggest predator here. No, it's not. We have teeth from big allosauroids like Acrocanthosaurus, more or less. This is probably from Brian, huh? But you can see some of these enamel wrinkles and whatnot. Unfortunately, it's poorly preserved. But these are all yellowcat, member of the Cedar Mountain Formation. There's a number of other teeth, including some from southern Arizona that are allosauroid, and there's a few different varieties. So seemingly, these aren't all living at the same time, but seemingly there is a variety of allosauroids in this kind of gap that we thought existed in North America. Because it's kind of alright, the allosauroids are there slow down. The allosauroids are there with Acrocanthosaurus. They died out. Utahraptor was here as the big predator. And then we start getting the Tyrannosaurs coming in. This makes it seem like, no, the Acrocanthosaurids, the Carcharodontosaurs, they were around for a good bit. They're just not preserved right now. So yeah, there's that. You can see some of the formation here, Cedar Mountain Formation. This is going to be the upper and lower yellowcap members, poison strip member, ruby ratch members. But yeah, just hey, look, all kinds of new dinosaurs, Acrocanthosaurs and such, coming from the Cretaceous of North America. Yeah, and the one from Arizona, because I am from there and I care, is most likely an Acrocanthosaurus. You also have the Gobiosuchids. This is a group of crocodilians that were thought to be much later. This one kind of just goes, hey, yeah, they're actually a lot older than we thought. Kind of smushed up face. But yeah, pushes them back. This one is Platyognathus sui, from the early Jurassic Lufeng Formation. There was a gap here until the earliest Cretaceous, so like you're making a huge jump of this ghost lineage that it basically creates a ghost lineage. It's like, oh, okay, this is an early Jurassic family. Oh no, it goes back way further. Yeah, so pushing back some croc dates for how early some of those groups evolved. We have this one here. This is bone infections in sauropods. What is interesting is these are basically all on lower limb bones. And you can see kind of the damage on some of these where you're getting these bone infections. Most of these bone infections, or all of these bone infections that were found, didn't heal, meaning they died more or less as the infection was active, and it could have even been a cause. There's all kinds of hypotheses you could do that probably can't be tested. Like, I don't know, maybe there was flooding and they were walking through a river and a tree ran into their legs and hurt them, right? Like, there could be something that was low-lying that just scraped the heck out of their legs and caused these infections to happen in the bone, right? But otherwise, you would kind of expect the if they got hit in a flood, they wouldn't be all more or less together. Like there's a lot of weird thoughts on how this happened, and that's all hypothetical and almost impossible to test. But it is just really interesting to me to think about, like, why do all of these sauropods from this place have injured limb bones, lower limb bones, and seemingly all died while that infection was still happening. Yeah, really, really odd. How uncommon are fossils found in metamorphic rock? Fairly uncommon. You can find them, but it needs to be fairly lightly metamorphosed, or you need very specific conditions. Melanie During actually did a poster on that at SVP Cincinnati. So she'd be someone to email and ask about her research there on that kind of thing. Stem mandibulate, meaning essentially as you start getting into crustaceans, arthropods and such, their mandible is going to be moving side to side. This is kind of towards the start of that. With Primicaris getting into here, it's very trilobite-like, but it doesn't have quite the same kind of segmentation or separation on the head that you see in trilobites. So it is different. It's closer to a Morella morph, so it's something probably closely related to Morella. This is just a few millimeters long. It's from the 518 million year old Chenjiang biota. You can also look at kind of some of these segmentations in the limbs. Let me zoom in on this actually. You can kind of see where some of these segments are coming in on the limbs, like here. So you're starting to get really this kind of arthropod body plan. And I say go to what, figure 5? You know, there's your kind of life reconstruction of it. Here's some of your mouth apparatus. So it's not quite being a mandible yet, but you're starting to get towards some of those structures. And then you eventually will get into your arthropods and whatnot that do actually have those sort of structures. And you can see kind of here where they're talking about the various limbs and how they get adapted into these structures. That's a big part of invertebrate paleo stuff. That's osteomyelitis, that's a bone infection. There we go. Continuous presence of dinosaur morphs in South America from the middle to late Triassic. This is another one it's a silosaurid loosely, based on the shape of the hip. Hips in dinosaurs are really important for understanding if something is or isn't a dinosaur. Notably, perforated acetabulum, that is where the hip attaches to the femur. It's a hole that goes all the way through it. There'd be another bone like right up here, and so it would be kind of perforated, but it wouldn't be like a round circle through it. And so that's why there's a lot of debate that still exists about if silosaurs are dinosaurs or aren't dinosaurs. Because it's kind of that condition, but it's not quite that condition, but it's kind of that condition. Regardless, Itaguria occulta, it's a new one. It is from the later parts of the Triassic, from what I recall, right? But basically it's just saying, yeah, these things hung around. Yeah, it's in the Cardian as opposed to earlier. Regardless, they hung around pretty well and potentially did become the first ornithischians. Prianodontia is one of these early kind of like crown groups of ornithischians almost, where there's a lot of them. But yeah, they are saying that this is within dinosaurs, and there's a whole bunch of these in South America, and they were around the whole time. And then later in the Jurassic, you start getting your more typical ornithischians. Hips are also important for locomotion, yeah. Silosaurs are interesting. Like, what I would really like to have is one really good one that was found. Yeah, okay, so here's where you get some of these North American ones. You still get one here in South America. A few more in South America, and it's like there's not a hiatus of them in South America. They were still there in the early Carnian. Yeah, so it's going to take a lot of work to figure out if that is a dinosaur or not, basically. Yeah, I don't know that. This is new non-Everostran material from the Lufeng Formation. Here you go. It's a theropod dinosaur, but it's not one of the main groups of them. The Everostrans being one of the later groups that includes things like the Ceratosaurs and the Allosaurs and the Coelurosaurs. It's probably related to Dilophosaurus, or even more specifically, Sinosaurus. There was a phylogeny done. Sinosaurus also plotted really closely with Shungbisaurus, which means Shungbisaurus might just be Sinosaurus, just an immature, just another individual that was named a different species, even though it's the same species. This material is from an immature one. We don't really know much about ontogeny of early theropods, so it's really hard to say if it is or isn't a different animal. So, unfortunate, but it's hard to say what's happening. It is cool to have another fossil and go, hey, look, we are finding more fossils here. Disputed dinosaur archosaur that's more interesting is Smolk. Smolk is interesting, but like Smolk is well enough preserved that it's literally just well, we need to find one of these that has good fossils if we want to say anything. Oh well. Like, that's literally it. That's all you can say. Because everything we have is, well, this one trait, and it's such a mismatch that it's like, okay, we need the ankle bones, basically, in order to go, okay, it has this kind of ankle or this kind of ankle. That means it's a Pseudotsuchian, or that means it's a dinosaur. Which also, the Silosaurs have non-dinosaurian ankles, but they do have ornithodeiran ankles. So they could have later converged on ankles of the ornithischians, if they are ornithischians, and the more dinosaurian ankle condition. Or they could just not be dinosaurs and be dinosauromorphs, that aren't actually dinosaurs. So the silosaurs are also something we need better preservation of. So this is looking at Temnodontosaurus, and it's not the, hey, look, it's a super sneaky boy paper. This is bromatolites, basically stomach contents, and potentially vomits even. Here's one of the stomach contents. Inside its stomach was an entire Stenopterygus, which is a smaller ichthyosaur. There's one figure in here that really kind of highlights that. Here's some more stomach contents. Let me find the one figure I'm thinking of. There you go. So here you go. Here's what Temnodontosaurus ate. Whatever it wanted. It would eat these smaller ones whole, and then be able to tear apart adult Stenopterygus more completely. But yeah, it literally just eats whatever it wants. What did I say? Figure, which one am I looking for? 5, right? So yeah, there's your stomach contents where there's little vertebra and stuff in there from ichthyosaurs. There you go. There's the vomited one, regurgitolite, which means this is an ichthyosaur that was eaten by another ichthyosaur that was then vomited back up. Giant ichthyosaurs, like, it's like, oh, they're going to be slow and all this stuff is kind of what people were thinking, and then it's like, oh, maybe they were filter feeding, and it's like, no, they were macropredatory. Like they were eating anything. They were very aggressive feeders. Like there's the Guizhouichthyosaurus, I think it is. Guizhouichthyosaurus. If I could type. Where it's this fossil that has part of the body of a thalattosaur in its stomach. And this is one from the Triassic, but it turns out when there's nothing else that's a major predator in the oceans, you can kind of get away with a lot. So with a lot of just filling in that space. But we also know about their stealth adaptations. Yep, that is actually one that I do also still have on here, but I did a separate video on it, so it's going to be a fairly short summary. But that's still here in a bit. This one, where do dinosaurs come from? How do they migrate? Right? These are kind of your estimated routes of dispersal. An origination event for dinosaurs in South America. Some came across to India. Some came up to North America, and then there was a distinct migration into parts of Africa and Europe and whatnot. I think the India one is really interesting because I know at least the phytosaurs there seem pretty endemic. So the phytosaurs, we find them most places, but whatever was happening in India with them was like, this is our specific population of them. So there's some weird things happening in the Triassic as far as dispersal routes of different animal groups. Okay, this is one I did a whole separate video on. This is the Allosaurus europaeus one, which suddenly I don't have access again. I need to check all my access stuff for these papers. But basically, hey look, you have your 3 different Allosaurus species, not counting Allosaurus anax, because this paper is probably well into the process of writing before that paper came out. But basically it's looking at all these skull material parts and going, actually Allosaurus europaeus is just Allosaurus fragilis. They're the same thing. Which sure, very well could be. I imagine some people are going to argue back about this because I've heard some people, some other researchers have already taken issue with it, which is part of science, right? Like no one's ever agree on 100% of it. So yeah, it's a bunch of taxonomic fighting, but it's with Allosaurus, so it's interesting because Allosaurus is one of these things we've found for decades, over a century, and then suddenly it's like, okay, we've found this animal for over a century, and now we're finding out, oh, but there's actually more than one species, with Jim Madsoni, europaeus potentially, and Allosaurus anax. Although Allosaurus anax may still just be a really large Gematsini or Fragilis as well, because we don't have a ton of material. Maybe the slight differences we see in the bones are just something that happens as it reached that maximum size that they could have. It's hard to know for sure. This is one that I wanted to do a video on and then I forgot to. But this is stomach contents of sauropod dinosaurs, specifically Diamantinosaurus. There we go. Which, love this figure. Open image, new tab. Where it talks about kind of some of this diversity in diet in some of these different sauropods. So you have the Verbocosaurids here, where it's like, yeah, okay, they're going to be eating mostly the lowest stuff. I forgot what group this is. The Dracaeosaurs being not quite as wide-mouthed, but still having a lot of these peg teeth, eating still somewhat short. Some things eating kind of in the middle, and then your really big, tall sauropods eating higher up. We haven't seen the last of Saurophaganax either. I don't doubt that we haven't seen the last of it. I think Andy's paper on it was fairly reasonable as far as its conclusions. So we'll see how the scientific community, the paleontological community, really looks at it. Also, this is really interesting because it's like, oh, hey, look, here's the brown as the gut contents. If you notice, some of them are kind of outside of where most of the body is. They do talk about, you have to go. Okay, thank you, Diana. We're almost wrapped up anyway, so we have a couple more papers still. Don't worry if you're still hanging out here, but, yeah. Anyway, they do talk about essentially the gut contents spreading out because as the animal decayed, it would have created a lot of gases, and at some point it popped, and some of the gut contents got moved away from the body of the animal before it got buried, which I think is very funny. Anyway, but yeah, it was eating different plants than the smaller Dracaeosaurs. So yeah, it's nice. You're able to kind of get this first real stomach contents of a sauropod to go, okay, yes, this is one of these tall ones. It was eating what we were expecting it was. We have soft tissues of sauropod feet as well. Which is, again, looking at the scaling. Here's some of these kind of scaling structures. Right, yeah. They should have an artistic reconstruction somewhere. At least of some variety. Yeah, there we go. You're not going to let me zoom in more? What a new tab. There we go. Yes, we have some really textured parts of the forefoot. And the rear foot is less textured like that for grip. However, obviously, they still did just fine. This is kind of what your scaling should be thought of as on a sauropod foot. I do think this part's really interesting down here, because potentially if those are overlapping, maybe squamates have overlapping scales across their body. Maybe if they're doing more burrowing or something, they also needed traction or whatnot. That could be part of that reason for that kind of evolution. But these animals are also very different scales, so I could be very wrong. This is going to be one of these where they kind of look at the coloration of a dinosaur or a fossil bird, which is still a dinosaur, yes. You can actually see right here kind of that paiga style where it's this little nub of a bone. If the person who was talking about short bird tails is still in there. But this is Shenyang, and it does not have art for it. Bird. Dinosaur. If I can't find it, I'm going to be disappointed. Okay. Regardless, it would have had like a kind of reddish to iridescent-y bluish crest based on it. And you can see there's a lot of feathers here. So it really was some sort of social display. We don't know if it was dimorphic or anything, but yeah, it would have been a fairly notable, iridescent blue to reddish crest. So this one was looking at the motion of tail range in Giraffatitan, which is loosely Brachiosaurus. Giraffatitan is its own genus, but a lot of your Brachiosaurus designs are based on Giraffatitan. And they're like, okay, here's the tail. Then you get some models going. Once I scroll down far enough, there you go. We can kind of see the rotation of it. It was not doing its tail whipping. But they were able to go, okay, this is actually fairly flexible. Surprisingly flexible. Here's a number of different models that they use to kind of calculate the amount of side-to-side flexion. And then they also have vertical flexion as well, so how far it can flex vertically downwards. So maybe it's not combat. Maybe it's not combat, but we really need to investigate why it was this flexible. There's some interesting stuff there. Yeah, I know Giraffatitan is not Brachiosaurus. I am saying that a lot of Brachiosaurus reconstructions have been based on Giraffatitan. So I know they're different animals. I know there's also a skull coming out for Brachiosaurus that'll help show that they're very different. But just in the general public lexicon, that is how they've been linked a lot of the time. So yes, but also for society. Yeah, like a surprisingly flexible tail indeed. I would not have expected Brachiosaurus of the sauropods to have that flexible of a tail. This is the part with the stealth adaptations. Here we go. These little cartilaginous strips at the trailing end of an ichthyosaur flipper, specifically in Temnodontosaurus, where again that's probably going to help streamline the water coming off of the fin so that it disturbs the water less. It's going to make it quieter. And you also have these longitudinal grooves on it that are going to basically do the same thing. Making it non-tetanurae. Giraffatitan wouldn't be a tetanurae. Tetanurans are specifically like the allosaurids and the Coelurosaurs. And at least in, I think, Boetiraptor, as a Coelurosaur tetanurae, it had a flexible tail base. All of the rest of it would have been fairly rigid. So there's a lot of variation in how flexible dinosaur tails are. You can, again, kind of see the structures here, these little trailing edge things. And then I really love that they did the fluid dynamics of just like, let's just make a simple model of it, see what happens. Yes, it reduces noise. Great. That's all you need to do. You don't need to go in there with a precisely measured, perfectly modeled flipper. You just need to show that the general concept is quieter. Is that? No, I still got more. Also, thing on Huepasuchus, lots of ichthyosaur stuff. Well, this is ichthyosauromorph. It's a little more basal. Where they went, hey, look, it has some skull parts that are similar to whales as far as how some of these things connect. Maybe it was filter feeding. And this paper basically comes in and goes, no, probably not, because its head is still a very different shape. While some of the bones on the upper part of the skull are similar, other parts of the head, such as the mandible, are not at all comparable. So it probably wasn't filter feeding. They do a number of other things. But the important conclusion is it's really hard to infer filter feeding in an extinct animal. Because, like, how do you know that? How do you know it didn't have, some sort of skin sac or something that could expand to bring in more water? But overall, they're going, it doesn't seem like Huepasuchus would have been well suited to it. So that's unfortunate. I thought it was really neat that we had one that was, we had an ichthyosauromorph that was filter feeding, but apparently not. Huepasuchus is also not very large. There's this whole group of relatively small ichthyosaurs or ichthyosauromorphs that are coming out of this kind of like lagoonal deposit in China, where it's like, yeah, these smaller ichthyosauromorphs are just swimming through this little area and through this little lagoon and doing weird things. And this is what I did. I did misexplain myself a little bit in there, and I do apologize to authors, because I actually got an email from Andrea Cow, or a comment from Andrea Cow saying, hey, we do talk about this. But this is for Shri Rapax, where it's similar size to something like Velociraptor, but a bit more robustly built. And I talk about, paleontologists aren't always thinking about niche partitioning in the same way, and more specifically, oh, hey, look, it's me. Paleontologists aren't always thinking about niche partitioning in as nuanced a way as they could. And I say that in part because, at least on the paleontology communities online, a lot of times it's Spinosaurus. It was only eating fish, or it was only on land. And it's like, no. There's a lot of give and take both ways here, right? Niche does not mean it is totally separate from another animal. There can be a lot of overlap. And I did not explain well that I meant, yeah, there can be a lot of overlap. And these authors did do a very good job of describing that in the paper. I just did a poor job of explaining that they said that in the paper when I made the video on it. So apologies to those authors. Here's a good one, because that's going to be if it loaded in, it would be pretty. Oh well. But yeah, it's a neat new dromaeosaur. We're finding more and more of these out of Mongolia, and I know at least one person is arguing for a number of new species out of things that have already been found. So we will see what happens when they finally publish. Yeah, people saying T-Rex never hunted sauropods. It probably did, right? Like, especially when you're reaching very large sizes as a megatheropod, so not necessarily Shri Rapax, you are getting to a point where you need to be less selective about your food. You're getting to a point where it's like, oh, is that convenient to grab? Yes, then I'm going to grab it. This one is Mirasaura, related to Longisquama, and look, has these weird filamentous structures coming off of its back that aren't feathers, they aren't fur, it's some weird other third thing, seemingly. But yeah, very strange, and it helps us figure out what Longisquama is. Seemingly, they're related to the Trypanosaurs, which are already very strange animals. And God, I can't read it. Hyperonectar is already thought of having been pretty similar to a lot of the Trypanosaurs. So the fact that these are even further down this tree is really, really interesting. Just because it's like, oh yeah, we thought for sure Hyperonectar was well within the Trypanosaurs. Or, I mean, at least Trypanosauromorpha, but closer down here. And it turns out, no, there's actually other things that are also still doing strange things that are over here. So yeah, the Trypanosauromorphs are odd. I really wish we also knew more at the base of the tree so we could kind of figure out where it is. Because otherwise there's just this weird, long Permian ghost lineage all through here. Or alternatively, they split off closer to here and it's a much shorter lineage. Who knows? And of course, I believe it's Gabriel Gueto did the art for it, which hopefully is here. Nope, I just need to Google the animal. Nope, not that one. Mirasaur, there we go. Find the beautiful, beautiful artwork. There we go. This is the Gabriel Gueto art. That's the pretty art of it. Yes, James Napoli is the one I am waiting to publish his stuff on for the other taxonomic stuff. Biome, ecosystem, and habitat. It kind of depends, because a lot of habitats and ecosystems are mosaic. An ecosystem is going to be kind of how everything interacts specifically. The habitat is the part of the ecosystem an animal inhabits. And biome, I guess, is going to be pretty similar to ecosystem. I don't really use the term biome that much, so it's not really one that I think about as often. Someone was asking that in the chat. The Madigan information being studied more intensively. I do wish it would be as well. But Kyrgyzstan has its own stuff to deal with. Acutostropheus, oh, I actually recorded a video on this that we are in the process of editing. But real quickly then, Acutostropheus is a new, what's your face? Tanystrophiid, and there's a number of, there's 3 separate Tanystrophiids that were found. You can see on this one how it kind of forms this neural spike. That's going to be Acutostropheus. However, there is something that is very much like Tanystropheus in that its neck vertebra is wildly long. I mean, I say that it's like, what, 25 millimeters. However, it is long and thin. So think of Tanystropheus, but just much smaller. Tanystropheus being this very, very long-necked animal. Now, there's one getting in. But yeah, here's kind of Tanystropheus. These are not from marine deposits. All the other known Tanystrophiids are. So the fact that this has shown up here in the Chinle Formation is strange. And I will say I have seen the holotype material of Acutostropheus, and yeah, it's like all 4 of the bones of it fit in a thing, you know, this big. It's like here they all are. Oh, okay, it's not very large. But yeah, kind of strange that it has this. In the video that I recorded on it, I go into details a lot more. My wife is bullying me that I don't use biome because then I think of Minecraft. No, I don't, because I just don't use that term. My wife's bullying me. Okay, popping back in on me. Hi, everyone. That was the end of what I had for this. Let me actually... What was it? I forgot to do this one earlier, and it is one I should do. There we go, findings. And go back to here. This is another one from a little before. This is back in March, but this is Henry Sharp's paper on Exoparia. I saw his talk on this at Society of Herbert Paleontology meeting, and yeah, like, it was a great talk. It was well received, I think. But yeah, you get this muscle attachment, and again, it's not quite a cheek. That is very important. It does not extend very far up the mouth. It does extend some up the mouth, but calling it a cheek would not be accurate. What you're doing in here is you're looking for certain structures like Sharpey's fibers, which indicate muscle attachment. Thin section of the bone. Look for these structures, and it's like, okay, well, they have these structures. There's a muscle attaching here somewhere. And then finding where it attached on the lower jaw. So yeah, it's not like it comes all the way up like a cheek, even in some of these other things that you would expect to be more likely to have cheeks, even because they would have had more of a chewing motion. But yeah, there you go. There's kind of your orientation of it. Some of them are very different, right? Because like this one's going forward and back more. This one's, you know, they're angled differently. Dinosaurs evolved a lot of different uses for this muscle over time. So, yeah. And then you can see that the stars are everywhere that they've sampled. So they sampled Tyrannosaurus, or a Tyrannosaurid, some sort of hadrosaur, and a ceratopsid. And it seems pretty consistent, so you just kind of go, all right, probably most of these had this. So... that said, that is going to be a wrap unless people have other questions. But yeah, that should be it. Anyway, I'm gonna wait for the stream to catch up and see if people have comments to make. Anything? Your only comment is Greg Paul is a bozo. You have a vendetta against that man, so I'm not going to take that seriously. Another one for August and September. Yes, there will be. And then we're also going to probably, at least starting with August, get back into recording them just because those do better on views. But this way, I'll know what to say better when I record those. So hopefully that'll be there. And hopefully at some point I'll be able to also just start doing this almost more weekly, or at least bi-weekly, so that I'm also not sitting here talking to a camera for 2 hours straight. Because my voice is a little shot, although I also did just get over a cold, so that's probably not helping. So we got thank yous. If anyone else is in there, gonna get going. Final comments, anyone? Nope. No vendettas against sun. Okay, cool. No vendettas in science. You are underestimating the scientists, and that's where I am going to be ending the stream then, I think. Be safe, everyone. Take care. Oh, and of course, as always, don't go extinct.